Imagine a world where trust is a rare commodity, betrayal is a daily survival tactic, and power is the ultimate prize. In the ruthless hierarchy of the mafia, only the most cunning, violent, and treacherous men make it to the top, and none embodied these traits more than Vito Genovese. His story is a cautionary tale of ambition without limits, a life driven by the insatiable hunger for control and power. Genovese wasn't just another mob boss. He aspired to be il capo di tutti capi, the boss of all bosses. His rise to the top was built on a foundation of deceit, betrayal, and murder, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. But what price did he pay for his ambition? Was his relentless quest for power worth the destruction he left behind? This is the story of Vito Genovese, a story filled with violence, betrayal, and ultimately, a downfall that forever changed the mafia landscape in America. Vito Genovese entered the world on November 21, 1897, in the quaint village of Risigliano, nestled in the picturesque region of Naples, Italy. His formative years were marked by a stark contrast of beauty and hardship, as the idyllic Italian countryside stood in sharp relief to the grinding poverty and pervasive violence that surrounded him. These early experiences would leave an indelible mark on young Vito, shaping his worldview and ultimately becoming the cornerstone of his notorious criminal career. In 1913, at the tender age of 15, Genovese and his family made the momentous decision to leave behind their homeland in search of the fabled American dream. They set sail for the United States, their hearts filled with hope for a brighter future in the bustling metropolis of New York City. Upon arrival, they found themselves drawn to the familiar sights and sounds of Little Italy, a vibrant but notorious neighborhood on Manhattan's Lower East Side. Little did they know that this enclave, teeming with fellow Italian immigrants, would serve as the perfect incubator for Vito's burgeoning criminal ambitions. Little Italy was a microcosm of the old world, where ancient traditions collided with the harsh realities of immigrant life in America. The streets were a labyrinth of opportunity and danger, where street gangs held sway and the iron-fisted rule of local mafia bosses often superseded the laws of the land. It was in this volatile crucible that Genovese first began to test the waters of criminality. His initial forays were modest, pilfering from unsuspecting street vendors, running errands for established mobsters, and participating in petty thefts. However, even in these early escapades, Genovese displayed a chilling propensity for violence that set him apart from his peers. As Genovese entered his early 20s, his reputation in the criminal underworld began to solidify. He was no longer just another immigrant youth trying to scrape by. He had become a figure of fear and respect in equal measure. With a keen eye for opportunity and an unquenchable thirst for power, Genovese swiftly aligned himself with rising stars in the mafia firmament. He forged alliances with the likes of Charles "Lucky" Luciano, whose strategic brilliance would revolutionize organized crime, Frank Costello, the smooth-talking Prime Minister of the underworld, and Joe the Boss Masseria, a powerful old-guard mafioso who controlled much of New York's criminal activities. But while many of his contemporaries might have been content with the spoils of small-time rackets, Genovese's ambitions stretched far beyond the confines of Little Italy. He saw the bigger picture, a vast criminal empire waiting to be conquered. Where others saw limits, Genovese saw endless possibilities. His insatiable hunger for power and wealth, coupled with his ruthless tactics, would soon propel him from the crowded tenements of Little Italy to the upper echelons of the American Mafia, setting the stage for a reign of terror that would reshape the landscape of organized crime for decades to come. The Prohibition era, 1920–1933, presented a golden opportunity for ambitious criminals like Vito Genovese to rise to power. The nationwide ban on alcohol production, sale, and transportation gave birth to a massive black market, and organized crime families swiftly moved to dominate the lucrative bootlegging industry. This period marked a significant turning point in Genovese's criminal career, as he began to forge alliances with some of the most influential figures in the underworld. One such figure was Arnold Rothstein, a Jewish gambler and criminal mastermind who played a pivotal role in shaping the modern American Mafia. Rothstein, known as the Brain for his shrewd business acumen, was among the first to recognize the immense profit potential in bootlegging. He saw an opportunity to transform the loosely organized gangs of New York into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Rothstein brought in young, ambitious mobsters like Genovese, Charles Lucky Luciano, and Frank Costello to help run his operations, effectively grooming the next generation of mafia leadership. Under Rothstein's tutelage, Genovese received a masterclass in the intricacies of organized crime. He learned the art of bribery, the importance of political connections, and the complexities of running large-scale illegal operations. However, while Rothstein valued brains over brawn, it was Genovese's penchant for violence that truly set him apart from his peers. He quickly gained a reputation for being ruthless and uncompromising when it came to dealing with rivals or anyone who dared to cross him. Genovese's rap sheet from this period paints a vivid picture of his violent tendencies. According to police records, he faced multiple charges in his youth, each more serious than the last. These included carrying a loaded revolver, a clear indication of his readiness for violence at any moment. In one incident, Genovese was charged with shooting a man in Queens, demonstrating his willingness to use lethal force. Another charge involved running down a man with a vehicle in Brooklyn, showcasing his disregard for human life and his resourcefulness in using any means necessary to eliminate his enemies. Despite the severity of these charges, Genovese, like many mobsters of his era, managed to avoid serious legal consequences. This ability to evade justice was not due to innocence or lack of evidence, but rather a testament to the corruption that permeated the legal system during this time. Genovese employed a combination of tactics to stay out of prison: substantial bribes to law enforcement and judicial officials, intimidation of witnesses and jurors, and the utilization of well-placed connections in both the underworld and the world of legitimate business and politics. As Genovese's power and influence grew, so did the audacity and brutality of his crimes. One of his most notorious early acts of violence came in 1930 when he allegedly carried out the murder of Gaetano Reina, a powerful mafia boss based in the Bronx. The circumstances surrounding this murder provide a chilling glimpse into the complex web of alliances and betrayals that characterized the mafia world of the time. Reina had been aligned with Joe the Boss Masseria, one of the most powerful mafia leaders in New York. However, Masseria began to suspect that Reina was secretly supporting his rival, Salvatore Maranzano, in what would soon explode into a full-scale mafia war. Genovese, always eager to prove his loyalty and advance his position, saw an opportunity in this situation. On a cold February night, Genovese allegedly lay in wait outside the home of Reina's mistress in the Bronx. As Reina left the house, Genovese ambushed him, firing a shotgun at close range and striking Reina in the head. The brutal efficiency of the killing sent shockwaves through the underworld and cemented Genovese's reputation as a man to be feared. The murder of Reina was more than just another gangland killing. It was a pivotal moment that helped ignite the infamous Castellammarese War. This bloody conflict, which raged from 1930 to 1931, would reshape the landscape of organized crime in America. The war pitted the old guard of the Mafia, represented by Joe Masseria, against a new faction led by Salvatore Maranzano, who hailed from Castellammare del Golfo in Sicily. Throughout this conflict, Genovese's star continued to rise. His willingness to carry out brutal acts of violence made him an invaluable soldier in the war. Moreover, his cunning and ambition allowed him to navigate the shifting alliances and power structures of the mafia world. As the bodies piled up on the streets of New York, Genovese was positioning himself to emerge as one of the major players in the new order that would arise from the ashes of the old. The Castellammarese War would ultimately lead to the deaths of both Masseria and Maranzano, paving the way for a new generation of mafia leaders, including Genovese, Luciano, and Costello. This new guard would transform the mafia into a more organized, business-like entity, creating the structure that would dominate organized crime in America for decades to come. In this turbulent and violent era, Vito Genovese thrived. His actions during this period laid the groundwork for his eventual rise to the top of the mafia hierarchy. The lessons he learned, the connections he made, and the reputation he built during Prohibition and the Castellammarese War would serve him well in the years to come, as he continued his relentless pursuit of power and control in the underworld. The Castellammarese War, 1930-1931, marked a pivotal moment in the history of the American Mafia, reshaping its structure and setting the stage for a new era of organized crime. This bloody conflict pitted two powerful factions against each other, each vying for supremacy over New York's lucrative criminal underworld. On one side stood Joe the Boss Masseria, a stalwart of the old guard who had risen to power through brute force and intimidation. On the other was Salvatore Maranzano, a Sicilian-born mafioso with grand ambitions of creating a new, more structured criminal hierarchy modeled after the Roman Empire. As the streets of New York became a battleground, Vito Genovese found himself in a precarious position. Initially aligned with Masseria, Genovese's loyalty was tested as the tide of war began to turn. Always the shrewd opportunist, he recognized the shifting balance of power and made a calculated decision that would alter the course of his career. Genovese, along with his close associate Charles Lucky Luciano, began secretly plotting against their own boss, seeing an opportunity to eliminate both warring factions and establish a new order. The betrayal was set in motion on April 15, 1931, in a small Italian restaurant on Coney Island. Masseria, believing he was meeting Luciano for a friendly game of cards, had no idea that his fate had already been sealed. As they played, Genovese and several other conspirators waited outside. When Luciano excused himself to use the restroom, it was the signal. Genovese and the others burst in, guns blazing, leaving Masseria dead in a hail of bullets. The assassination was a masterclass in mafia treachery, with Genovese proving his willingness to betray even his closest allies in pursuit of power. With Masseria eliminated, Maranzano briefly claimed victory, declaring himself boss of all bosses. However, his triumph was short-lived. Genovese, Luciano, and their cohorts had no intention of trading one dictator for another. They saw Maranzano's old-world mentality and rigid hierarchical vision as a threat to their own ambitions for a more modern, business-like criminal enterprise. Just 5 months after Masseria's death, they struck again. This time, they outsourced the hit to a group of Jewish gangsters to avoid suspicion, sending them to Maranzano's office disguised as tax agents. The result was the same. Another powerful boss eliminated, clearing the path for a new generation of mafia leadership. In the wake of these calculated assassinations, Luciano emerged as the architect of a new mafia structure. He established the Commission, a governing body comprised of the heads of the major crime families. This new system was designed to prevent future wars by providing a forum for dispute resolution and collective decision-making. It was a revolutionary concept that would shape organized crime for decades to come. Genovese's role in these events did not go unrewarded. For his loyalty to Luciano and his pivotal part in reshaping the mafia landscape, he was appointed underboss of the newly formed Luciano crime family. This position made him the second most powerful man in what would soon become the most influential mafia organization in the country. It was a testament to Genovese's cunning, his willingness to adapt, and his unrelenting ambition. The Castellamarese War and its aftermath demonstrated Genovese's defining characteristics: his opportunism, his ruthlessness, and his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of mafia politics. He had shown that he was willing to betray anyone, even his own boss, to advance his position. This ruthless pragmatism would continue to define his career, driving him ever upward in his relentless pursuit of power and control within the American mafia. In the years that followed, Genovese continued to expand his power and influence within the mafia. The end of Prohibition in 1933 forced the mafia to diversify its criminal operations, and Genovese quickly adapted. He became heavily involved in narcotics trafficking, extortion, and gambling, industries that would prove to be just as profitable as bootlegging. But even as he amassed wealth and power, Genovese's ambition continued to grow. One of Genovese's most notorious personal scandals came in 1932, following the death of his first wife. Not long after her passing, Genovese announced his intention to marry Anna Petillo, a woman who also happened to be his cousin. The only problem was that Anna was already married to a man named Gerard Vernetico. Genovese, undeterred by this obstacle, took matters into his own hands. In a chilling display of power, Vernetico was soon found strangled to death on a rooftop in Manhattan. With her husband out of the way, Anna married Genovese shortly thereafter. This incident was emblematic of Genovese's approach to both life and business. Anyone who stood in his way was eliminated. His lack of regard for human life and his willingness to commit acts of extreme violence made him one of the most feared men in the mafia. In 1936, Luciano, the boss of the family, was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison on prostitution charges. This created a power vacuum within the organization, and many expected Genovese, as Luciano's underboss, to take over leadership of the family. However, Genovese's ambitions were temporarily derailed when he was implicated in a murder from the early 1930s. Fearing that he would be prosecuted, Genovese fled to Italy in 1937 effectively abandoning his claim to the leadership of the Luciano family. His decision to flee to Italy was not one of cowardice, but rather a strategic move to avoid prosecution while continuing to build his power base from abroad. Genovese was well connected in Italy, and he used his time there to establish relationships with the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini. During his time in Italy, Genovese is believed to have carried out several assassinations on behalf of the fascist government, including the murder of anti-fascist newspaper editor Carlo Tresca in New York. Genovese's willingness to work with the fascist regime was a testament to his adaptability and his ability to switch allegiances when it suited his interests. But Genovese's time in Italy wasn't just about political assassinations. He also used the chaos of World War II to his advantage, engaging in black market operations and selling stolen goods to the highest bidder. His ability to profit from war and instability only further solidified his reputation as a ruthless and cunning operator. In 1944, the United States government tracked down Genovese in Italy and extradited him back to New York to face murder charges. However, in a twist of fate that would come to define Genovese's career, the key witness against him, Peter Latempa, died under mysterious circumstances while in protective custody. Latempa had reportedly ingested enough poison to kill several men, and with his death, the case against Genovese fell apart. Once again, Genovese had escaped justice, and in 1946, he was released from prison. He returned to New York to find that Frank Costello, another former ally of Luciano, had taken over leadership of the family in Luciano's absence. Genovese, ever the opportunist, bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what he saw as rightfully his. For nearly a decade, Genovese quietly built his power base, gathering loyal soldiers and forming alliances with other mafia figures. Meanwhile, Costello was busy consolidating his own power, focusing on building political connections and expanding the family's gambling and narcotics operations. But while Costello was more interested in politics and business, Genovese was laser-focused on reclaiming his position as the head of the family. In 1957, after years of plotting and waiting for the right opportunity, Genovese made his move against Costello. He ordered a hit on the 66-year-old mob boss, enlisting the services of a young Vincent the Chin Gigante to carry out the assassination. On the night of May 2, 1957, Gigante confronted Costello in the lobby of his apartment building and shot him in the head. Miraculously, Costello survived the attack, but the bullet had only grazed his head. Despite surviving the assassination attempt, Costello got the message loud and clear. His time as boss was over. Rather than retaliate, Costello chose to retire, leaving Genovese as the de facto leader of the family. With Costello out of the way, Genovese was now the boss of what would soon be known as the Genovese crime family. But his ascension to power came with consequences. The attempted assassination of Costello drew unwanted attention from law enforcement, and many within the mafia began to question whether Genovese's aggressive tactics were putting the entire organization at risk. Later in 1957, Genovese attended the infamous Havana Conference, a meeting of top mafia leaders organized by Meyer Lansky in Cuba. The conference was called to discuss the mafia's involvement in the narcotics trade, as well as the future of their operations in Cuba and Las Vegas. However, Genovese had a personal agenda at the conference. He wanted to become il capo di tutti capi, the boss of all bosses. During the conference, Genovese made his pitch to Luciano, who had been living in exile in Italy since his release from prison in 1946. Genovese argued that it was time for Luciano to step down and let him take control of the entire mafia. But Luciano, who had no intention of giving up his influence, rejected Genovese's proposal outright. In a private conversation, Luciano reportedly told Genovese, "There is no boss of bosses, and there never will be. If I ever change my mind, it won't be because of you." Luciano's refusal to back Genovese was a major blow to his ambitions, but it didn't stop him from consolidating his power within his own family. One of the last major obstacles to Genovese's complete control of the mafia was Albert Anastasia, the brutal head of the Anastasia crime family and a close ally of Frank Costello. Anastasia, known as the Mad Hatter for his erratic and violent behavior, was one of the most feared men in the mafia. As long as Anastasia was alive, Genovese knew that his power would never be secure. In October 1957, Genovese, with the help of Carlo Gambino, orchestrated the murder of Anastasia. On the morning of October 25th, Anastasia walked into a barbershop in Manhattan, sat down for a shave, and closed his eyes. Moments later, two gunmen entered the shop and opened fire, killing Anastasia in a hail of bullets. The assassination of Anastasia cleared the way for Gambino to take over his family, and it solidified Genovese's position as the most powerful mob boss in New York. Flush with success, after the murders of Costello and Anastasia, Genovese decided to call a national meeting of mafia leaders to celebrate his new position and discuss the future of the organization. The meeting was held in November 1957 at the estate of Joseph Barbara in Appalachian, New York. It was supposed to be a triumphant moment for Genovese, a chance to showcase his power and cement his status as the boss of bosses. But the Appalachian meeting would prove to be Genovese's greatest blunder. Local law enforcement had been tipped off to the gathering after noticing an unusual number of expensive cars parked outside Barbara's estate. The police quickly surrounded the property, and in the ensuing chaos, dozens of mafia members fled into the woods, leaving behind a trail of evidence. The fallout from the Appalachian meeting was disastrous for the mafia. More than 60 mafia members were arrested, and the meeting exposed the mafia's existence to the public in a way that had never happened before. The FBI, which had long been skeptical of the mafia's existence, now had undeniable proof of a nationwide criminal organization. Genovese's attempt to consolidate power had backfired spectacularly, and it marked the beginning of his downfall. In the aftermath of the Appalachian fiasco, Genovese's enemies within the mafia began to plot his downfall. Carlo Gambino and Meyer Lansky, both of whom had grown wary of Genovese's aggressive tactics, decided that it was time to get rid of him. They allegedly paid a Puerto Rican drug dealer to implicate Genovese in a narcotics trafficking operation, knowing that the US government was cracking down on the drug trade. In 1958, Genovese was arrested on drug trafficking charges. Despite his protests of innocence, he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. It was a stunning fall from grace for the man who had once aspired to be the most powerful mob boss in America. But even behind bars, Genovese continued to wield influence over the mafia. He ran his crime family from his prison cell, giving orders through trusted intermediaries. However, his time in prison was marked by paranoia and betrayal. In 1962, a fellow inmate named Joe Valachi, fearing that Genovese was planning to kill him, became the first mafia member to publicly testify about the inner workings of the organization. Valachi's testimony, known as the Valachi hearings, was a major blow to the mafia, and it exposed the secret world of organized crime to the American public. Vito Genovese died of a heart attack in prison on February 14, 1969. But his legacy continues to loom large over the history of the mafia. His rise to power was marked by ruthless ambition, betrayal, and violence. But his fall was just as dramatic. In his quest to become the boss of all bosses, Genovese made powerful enemies and left behind a trail of destruction. Genovese's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. His willingness to betray friends, allies, and even his own family in pursuit of power ultimately led to his downfall. In the end, Genovese achieved what he wanted: control of the most powerful crime family in New York, but at what cost? His reign was short-lived, and his actions brought unprecedented scrutiny to the mafia, leading to the eventual decline of the organization. The story of Vito Genovese is a dark chapter in the history of organized crime, one filled with ambition, violence, and betrayal. It is a story that reminds us of the destructive power of greed and the fleeting nature of power in the underworld. As we conclude this dark chapter in the history of organized crime, Vito Genovese's story serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of unchecked ambition and greed. His rise and fall paint a vivid picture of the fleeting nature of power in the underworld. If you found this exploration of Genovese's life intriguing, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. For more fascinating stories from the annals of crime history, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to stay notified of our latest uploads. Share this video with friends and family who appreciate delving into the complexities of human nature and the consequences of unbridled ambition. Your support helps us continue bringing these captivating stories to light. Until next time, remember that true power lies not in domination, but in the choices we make and the legacy we leave behind. Thanks for watching.